Now, back to the epidemiology of this UK strain, which, when you think about what we've experienced in this country, that is, hotel quarantine is full of the strain in 4 different states. It arrived here in Australia in December, but has been contained so far in hotel quarantine, apart from in Brisbane. This is the first time, though, it's somehow breached quarantine and may have led to community transmission. Deakin University Chair of Epidemiology, Professor Bennett, joined me early this afternoon. Catherine, a 3-day lockdown for Greater Brisbane after just 1 infection. It sounds like overkill, but we're dealing with a mystery strain here, aren't we?
That's right. We are concerned that this strain might be more likely to spread more quickly if it gets into the community. So the more that can be done at this leading edge, when they know they've had someone infectious in the community, to make sure they identify and capture any cases that might be out there, that's critical. So having a short, sharp lockdown buys a bit of time, suppresses the risk of they identify whether there has been any spread beyond this cleaner who was infected at work.
So 3 days of lockdown, though. We haven't had a 3-day lockdown at any stage during the pandemic.
That's right. I mean, it's more or less what ended up in Adelaide when they had their short lockdown and shortened it again. This is what we call a circuit breaker. So it's different to what we've had in place both in the first wave and in Victoria in the second. That's where you're trying to contain spread that's already occurring in the community. This is a different model. This is where the WHO and others, and myself included, think it's a good strategy if you can have a short, sharp lockdown. If you've got community transmission in very early stages, it just protects you from wider spread and the need to go to more serious lockdowns or other measures down the track. So it's a circuit breaker idea. It's not keeping people in lockdown for multiple incubation periods. It's just locking people down till testing can be completed and they can determine if there has been spread. And they're doing it on an earlier signal in this case, because if they can stop this at the first case and identify spread and stop it at that point, then it's much better than going to something, much more widespread in the community, because it's harder to chase down fast-spreading viruses.
If it is more contagious, does that mean it's more deadly or not?
No, it's not more deadly. The chances of developing serious illness are the same whether you have this mutant or other variants of the coronavirus. The concern is if it's likely to lead to these big waves or it's harder to contain big waves, then we still will see more people with serious illness just because we've got more cases. But thankfully, it doesn't cause more severe disease or more likely to cause death than the current variants that have been circulating for some time.
And will our 2 vaccines that will be rolled out next month, will they operate by combating this particular strain too?
Look, that's a good question, Chris, and so far the news coming back from the scientists behind these vaccines is that their vaccine will cover this particular variant. So it has some changes to that protein spike. That's what allows it to attach to cells very effectively and increase infectivity, but at the same time, it's not changed enough that the vaccines won't work. So far looking good that the vaccines will still cover this variant.
And what's your view of what National Cabinet decided to do today about no test, no fly for those departing to come back to Australia, and also a cap put on some of these hotel quarantine numbers?
Look, doing that over the next couple of weeks as they transition to these testing procedures is a smart move. It just takes some pressure off our quarantine as we tighten that even further. It's great to see things like daily testing or each shift testing of our workers. It protects them, their families, as well as the wider community. And we've seen in this recent case in Queensland, she might have been identified on the very day she first became infectious, and that would have made a big difference without 4 days lag to getting a test result. So working with the return travellers, it doesn't give you a 100% guarantee that you won't bring in someone who's still positive once they arrive in Australia or during transit by testing them and making sure they're negative before they get on the flight. But it will reduce the number of people who are carrying the virus as they come into Australia. So that's all going to help ease some of the pressure, allow us to keep tightening up the borders and reduce the risk of getting these crossovers from our international border into the community, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, reduce the existence of this strain, but also the risk. To the vaccine rollout, would you be taking the jab, and why?
Yes, I'll definitely take the jab. It's got a good safety profile, and I'll be very satisfied if our TGA in Australia, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, if their very thorough review says these vaccines are safe, then I'd be very happy to have the vaccine. We have a very rigorous process here in Australia. And we know from what we've seen overseas that if we've got those safety guarantees, it does work to reduce your chance of getting ill, let alone getting serious illness or perhaps dying from the virus. So absolutely, there'd be no reason for me not to have it unless I was one of those small numbers in the community with particular, contraindications, as they call it. So there might be some people it's not rolled out to immediately, people with very severe allergies, for example. And it also hasn't yet been tested in children under the age of 16 or 18, depending on the vaccine. So there'll be some groups, they won't roll it out to immediately. I won't be top of the line, but they will work through in a priority order the people that they roll the vaccines out to once they're approved.
What kind of take-up will we need to have in Australia for it to be effective?
Look, we do want to have as many people have the vaccine as possible. We don't yet know whether herd immunity will be possible. We don't know if this in fact will stop all infections or just those that are symptomatic infections. The more we learn about that, that will determine whether or not, we can achieve herd immunity, in which case we would want the majority of Australians who are physically able to have the vaccine. Some people, as I said, for medical reasons won't. But if the vast majority do, then we'd be in a good position for herd immunity. If we can't use the vaccine to get herd immunity, if people still might carry the virus, even if they don't get symptoms, then in a way it makes it even more important to get the vaccine because it'll still be out there. If you choose not to vaccinate, then you're at risk of actually getting ill with this. And so I would think that would be motivation to get vaccinated, in itself.